a wildlife photographer, and I'm going to take the next 18 to 20 minutes to bore you with something called as coexistence in nature. For a wildlife photographer, coexistence is not merely an idea to be mentally toyed with. It is something that we live every day. In the jungle, there's an immense sea of creatures that are the living examples of coexistence and interdependence. But when you see something as common as coexistence, and when something as regular as coexistence, which is seen in everyday life, is there, you tend to lose its essence. You tend to take it for granted, like we take a lot of other things that are very regular in our lives for granted. I also used to do the same till the time I started wildlife photography. Wildlife photography helped me to understand how coexistence and interdependence has been in the nature from the start, has been intertwined in the very fabric of nature from the start. And hence, I think in the right order of things, it would make more sense if I start with how I started wildlife photography. As a child, I was always sure that I wanted to become a wildlife photographer. My father knew how to operate a camera well enough, and he was the one who taught me. He used to take me to all these national parks and wildlife parks, and since the childhood, I was extremely close to nature. My parents love wildlife, and from there, I decided that I want to explore wildlife photography. Too rosy, isn't it? In reality, nothing like this happened. Reality was far more dramatic than this. Actually, my career path was prepared by my father that I had to become an advocate. I had to pursue LLB. And while I was giving my 12th examinations, interestingly, one day I opened Facebook. I saw that a lot of my seniors were uploading these pictures with blur in the background. And I'm like, what is this? This is not possible with a mobile camera. To the photographers out there, have a fair idea what I'm talking about. That blur in the background you see when you click a picture with a DSLR, the bokeh in the technical language. And I thought, ye to chahiye. What is this? I need that kind of a picture. College jaake pehla kaam yahi kar rahe hain, wo blur wala photo khishna hai. I started researching about it a little, and I got to know that there is something called as a DSLR, and DSLR helps you to get those kind of pictures. All right, I asked my father to get me a DSLR, and regular discussions he gave into my demand. I got a camera. I started researching about it a little, and simultaneously I was also preparing for my LLB entrance exam in Delhi University. Got to know the basics of it, and somehow I got into a basic photography course in Delhi. There I explored the basics of a camera, and it was a weekend course, SI regular time pass ke liye I joined, and the reason was, frankly, because the first attempt that I gave for the LLB entrance exam, I could not clear. So I had a lot of spare time in my hands, and I thought, chalo, photography or explore kar lete hain. All right, I got the camera, I started exploring, I started understanding how a camera works. And gradually, I realized that flying birds used to catch my attention a lot. So to the people who've ever operated a camera, you know that you can capture 1/4000th of a second, 1/8000th of a second. That is immense amount of action. You can freeze any kind of fast action from that. I saw that these birds, when they fly, those feathers that open, that used to catch my attention like anything. So that is not really possible to be seen with the naked eye. So that is something that new that you explore when you're actually experimenting with a camera. Now, because flying birds used to catch my attention, I sometimes used to bunk my classes and go to these bird sanctuaries on the outskirts of Delhi. Okhla Bird Sanctuary hai, and Sultan Bird Sanctuary hai. And somehow I was introduced to Bharatpur, Kyoladio National Park in Rajasthan. I went there, I remember my mother was with me, and I saw this lady with the big lens, and the moment you see a big lens, you're impressed. Ke ye to kuch hai masla. So I saw that, and I went to her, and I asked her, ma'am, I also want to become a wildlife photographer. What exactly are you doing? She told me, I'm not teaching, I'm a wildlife photographer. Her name was Ratika Ramaswamy. A lot of you must have heard about her, very famous bird photographer in India. And she told me that you need to find somebody called Sudhir Shivaram if you want to learn photography. I noted that name, and I still remember while I was coming back from Bharatpur to Delhi, I was constantly researching about Mr. Sudhir Shivaram. I saw his website, his Facebook page, and I got to know that he's taking all these workshops where you can learn photography. All right, but a female, only child, regular conventional family, you need to introduce the concept of wildlife photography. Wildlife and photography separately are that conventional that when they're coming together, it becomes super unconventional. That how is it even possible for a female to pursue wildlife photography? मतलब अकेली लड़की को जंगल में थोड़ी भेज देंगे. So that was the straight thought. But I came back and I asked my father that there is this workshop happening, I want to go. He said no. The workshop was in South India. After that, I used to stalk Sudhir sir's website every day, and one day he declared a workshop in Bharatpur, the same place where I saw Ratika Ramaswamy. Now this place was near Delhi, and I had my hopes high कि हो सकता है पापा मान जाए. I asked my father, and he said no. Discussions went on and became arguments, and then became little fights, petty fights that we have with our parents. And ultimately he said, ठीक है यार जाओ. I texted Sudhir sir. I said, sir, I need a seat. But by then, the seats were full. Sudhir sir told me, sorry, there are no seats. Now, I used to text him every day, sir, please allow me to come. If there's no room in the hotel, I'll sleep outside the hotel. I'll get my beanbag, but aane do, please. Jaise taise. All right, one day, he was kind enough. Maybe there was a cancellation or whatever, change of heart. He said, aa jao. I ran to my father and I said, Dad, I need to pay for this. I need to register for the workshop. Papa had already forgotten that there has been some kind of a discussion at home, and he's like, which workshop? You're not going to any workshop. I'm like, Papa, please, बहुत मुश्किल से ऐसा हुआ है, allow me to go to the workshop. And he says, okay, if you want to go, take your mother along. I remember I had my exam that day, so we reached late. It's in Rajasthan, and it was, I think, early February, extremely cold. And I reached late, so I was told that tomorrow you have to wake up at 4 o'clock. By 5 o'clock you have to be ready, 5 a.m. By 5:30 you need to leave the hotel and enter the park. All right, challenges, I was ready. Next morning I woke up, it was pitch dark, super cold, hands were freezing, there was this numbness in the fingers, got all the gear, sat on the rickshaw and started entering inside the park. Drove for about 40 minutes or so, super cold. Ultimately we stopped at a point, the assembly point, and there I'm told, now what you do is you pick up your gear in your hands, that 8-10 kilos, whatever I was carrying, and start walking inside a few kilometers, wait there in the wet mud, sit there, there'll be 2 birds coming and you click those birds. Birds का आना भी पक्का नहीं है, ठंड पक्का है और पता नहीं है exactly करना क्या है. And all the people who were there with me were seniors carrying these big lenses, and I mean, that was anyway making me super nervous. All right, I started walking and I still remember that day I had tears in my eyes. 8 kilos, extreme cold, and I thought, कहाँ फंस गए? I need to just wrap it up as soon as possible, and I'm going to rush home and I'm going to apologize to my father and I'm going to pursue LLB. Fortunately for me, I went inside. The birds came in half an hour. I remember I was sitting in that wet mud and the birds came in. I clicked a couple of pictures. Things started to get normal. Sun rose, temperature rose, and when I started feeling normal, I played back the pictures. There was this one picture that caught my attention, one frame. Saris cranes, if you've heard of, these are beautiful white birds with red necks. And there was a pair of Saris cranes who were looking above. The fog was falling on them. I could smell the grass. There was dew drops on the leaves. It was all green. In the background, it was all white. Beautiful fog was falling. And in that moment, hardly anybody is going to come early morning to this place, wait for 2 hours in crazy cold, just to see a pair of cranes calling, looking above with that fog. And I can be the bridge between the inside of the woods and the outside world. I can be the bridge between the little things, the little common species that look so beautiful inside the forest that we ignore like anything when we are entering. I can be the voice of that. In that moment, I realized that perhaps this was another picture that I clicked. And in that moment, I realized that perhaps I can be the bridge between the innocence in the eyes of a langur and the outside world. Or maybe the motherhood of an elephant, the love of a mother elephant and the outside world. Or maybe the cuteness of a calf, elephant baby calf, and you guys. The majesty of a tiger walking on this beautiful golden hour. The light is falling on the tiger and there are all the leaves and the beautiful canopies there in the forest. And that is the moment I decided that this is something that I need to pursue. This is another image that I would like to show you guys here because we are talking about coexistence. What do you see? There's a deer and there's a black bird called drongo, which is landing right on the nose of the deer. A lot of people who see this image, they strongly believe that perhaps there's some kind of a cordial interaction that is happening between the bird and the deer. Perhaps there's some kind of a friendship that they share, some kind of a beautiful equation that they share. Interestingly, in reality, the deer is getting irritated with the bird and the deer is trying to shoo away the bird. Because the black birds called as drongos, they pluck the ticks on the bodies of the deer, and here in these images, this black bird is trying to pick those ticks from the nose of the deer. See how interesting and beautiful nature has created it. The bird is picking the ticks and it's feeding itself. It's a food for the bird. And the deer is getting grooming in return. It's very difficult for a deer to get rid of the ticks by its own. But the bird is coming, picking the ticks, eating it, savoring the food, and the deer is actually getting groomed and is being saved from a lot of diseases that can happen due to the ticks, a lot of inconvenience that can happen due to the ticks. Interestingly, this image was actually widely liked. Nat Geo, your short, published it. A lot of newspapers in UK published it. It was widely accepted in print media. It was widely accepted on social media. Received a lot of love. A very basic species, a deer and a drongo, you can find anywhere. And that is coexistence in nature for you. I've always been very inspired and attracted to this concept wherein something can give something else a property that something is not having, in the virtue of a gift. Confused. I'm talking about the Amazon and the Sahara story. I assume a lot of you must have heard about that. Basically, to the people who don't know, Amazon is a rainforest, largest rainforest in the world, and Sahara is the largest desert in the world. You know, Amazon would not have existed if there was no Sahara. The soil in Amazon, 90% of the soil in Amazon is devoid of the kind of phosphorus it needs in order to support that kind of vegetation it has. 90% of the soil. And the river system and the rains are such in the Amazon that they wash away tons and tons of nitrogen at the end of every year. However, how is it replenished? Sahara replenishes it. The plumes of dust, the desert soil that are there, they are carried to the Amazon, and so far Sahara is giving something Sahara does not have. That is life, and that is coexistence for you in nature. Here are a few facts that I wanted you to know. There was a research in geophysical research letters, again, which said that Sahara replenishes phosphorus and 90% of the soils are devoid of phosphorus. Nitrogen, and interestingly, more than 56% of the dust fertilizing the Amazon rainforest is coming from something called as the Bodel Depression in the northern Chad in Sahara Desert. They are far, but still Sahara is managing to give Amazon the life it needs. On the other hand, let's see what we are doing. To bring to light a few numbers, we are 7.6 billion people, which makes about 0.01% of the total living creatures on the earth. And this 0.01% has managed to cause the loss of 83% of the wild animals. That is a lot, trust me. 70% of the birds living today on the planet, 70% of them are poultry. Only 30% are left in the wild. And this is not me speaking. These are studies. There are studies that are there to support the facts. 60% of the mammals that are there are livestock. There are 36% of humans and only 4% of wild animals are left on the earth. Ask yourself, is it right time to talk about coexistence? 50% of the Earth's animals are lost in the last 50 years. 50% of the Earth's animals are lost in the last 50 years of humanity. Proceeding further, the destruction, the reason behind the destruction, of course, is the cutting of forests is for farming, lodging, and in the name of development that we see every day. And not just losing the wildlife, not just losing the nature, there are other things too that are affected, and we are directly affected by this destruction that is happening, the cutting of forests that is happening. 7,000 animal communities across 6 continents. And in that research, interestingly, it was known that a lot of wild places that were wiped off because of, in the name of lodging and in the name of development, they are actually harboring a lot of small animals, small rodents like bats and rats, which can carry a lot of diseases. But if I talk about an elephant, a baby elephant, a mother elephant can give birth to a calf every 2 years. The incubation period is very high. Due to that, there's a lot of investment in the immune system of a big animal. Because of that investment, it can take care of all the little diseases that are there. And hence, when we are wiping off forests like this at a constant speed, we are actually making sure that we are inviting these diseases for ourselves. We are the ones to be blamed. Ask yourself, is it the right time to talk about coexistence? Interestingly, a lot of scientists believe that this era, the era that we have invited, is the 6th mass extinction of life in Earth's 4 billion year history. If you ask me, it's not just the time to talk about coexistence. It's not just the time to talk about interdependence. It's not just the time to talk about conjunction. It is the time to tell ourselves, to preserve the planet, to tell ourselves that this is the time to talk about how we restore that imbalance. This is the time to talk about the harmony that we need to restore in the nature. This is the time to not talk about what we cannot do for the planet sitting at our homes, but what we can do in our own capacity, in our own little capacity. This is the time when we question ourselves. It is coexistence or no existence. Thank you.